Unless you've been living under a rock, and by a rock I mean not religiously consuming Ashes of Creation content, you've probably heard of Joshua Strife Hayes, even admitting that he mistook what was Pantheon, another great MMORPG on the horizon,
Ashes of Pantheon, Rise of the Creation Fallen,
for Ashes of Creation. Now this has angered a few people, and from inside of the Ashes of Creation community, it obviously looks egregious. But if you put yourself outside of these groups and you don't really follow development, as Joshua Strife Hayes says that he is not really interested in doing.
I don't really care about the development process. In the development process, anyone can say anything. And you can show something that looks really good in a vacuum,
then maybe you can start to see why this could potentially happen. And Sharif of Ashes of Creation, in his most recent Q&A, actually addressed this, not directly. He didn't mention Joshua Strife Hayes by name, maybe because it's so long, but he did say there were some content creators out there that were not really following development, and he kind of said in his own words why he believed that following development is important.
Oftentimes, these developments go for years without ever touching the consumer base from a feedback perspective. And the opportunity to provide iterative feedback during that process is lost. And when the product gets completed, there's not much you can do at that point.
And I agree with most of his takes. As a developer, I think that it's very important to hear what a gamer thinks of what I'm doing before it's done. Because once they tell me like, oh, you know, should have been this way, and I've already done it, it took me 2 years, all I can say is, sorry, it's not that way. I can make another game, but this is done. You know, it's not always going to be something that you can switch at the end. So let's talk about some of the ways that you can follow development if you want to. Of course, nobody can force you to be interested in something that you're not interested in. A lot of development is not that exciting. But a lot of the things that are exciting about development are not actually things you should be excited about, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. So let's get right into it. First and foremost, beware of big ideas. A big idea for a game, and I'll give you an example. If I said, I want to create a virtual world where you can do anything, that is the worst idea that you can have. And it's not that the end game, if you executed on that, wouldn't be good. It could be great, but it's a debt, okay? When I say, let's set out to create a world in which you can do anything, I have just put 100% of the most incredible workload that I could possibly imagine on my development team and my development cycle. There's nothing harder than that, in essence. So this is some of the problems that we may see with something like Star Citizen, of course, where they just want to do so much that although you might get excited as the consumer to say, hey, there's people out there who are going for it. They're going to try to make a game where you can do as much as humanly possible. That is the highest bar that you can set for development in terms of time, in terms of cost. So what should you get excited about? Well, it's when somebody tells you that you're going to be able to do all of these things, but they explain to you how it's going to become possible. And I think that Ashes of Creation has done a very good job of this. They tell you, here are the systems that are going to make it possible to have your kingdoms, to have your social structures that make things matter more. They didn't just say, our goal is to do that. They told you how it's going to be possible. Now, this is where you have to have a little bit of, I guess, critical thinking. Maybe some experience as a developer helps, but you can just sort of think through it and say, are these things going to lead to that? How hard are these things to execute? And the only place that still gives me a little bit of concern for Ashes of Creation is that there are so many systems at play to be able to make this happen that the interconnectivity of those systems is going to be something that's difficult to execute on. And execution is everything when it comes to a big idea. Next, let's talk about systems versus results. So in Pop-Up Dungeon, the game that we previously made, it was a systems-based game, as in we created a system that allows you to make your own abilities and characters and stuff like that. So if I show you a character, that is the result of the system. I'm not really showing you a car, I'm showing you an assembly line. So if you're excited about the car, that's great, and the car is still there, the car does exist. But some games are designed in such a way where that car, that end character, that playable thing is brute force development. That means there's no real systems in place aside from just the standard tools that almost any developer would use. And sometimes you develop a few tools to speed up the whole process. But other than that, I'm still having to develop this quest. Then I'll just develop that quest, develop this town, and now develop that town. And either I'm cookie cutter, just popping in models from one town to the next. Like if you've played New World, they're changing this actually in a day from when I'm making this. But there was just basically almost copy pasted cities throughout the world. So that's one way to do it, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when Ashes of Creation showed us tools that is making it so that the world can be made unique and handcrafted at a very high rate of speed. That's something to be excited about. It's showing you the assembly line. It's showing you how it is that you're going to achieve a massive amount of results. It's not just one cool car, it's a fleet of cars, right? So that also applies to in-game experiences. Same thing. If I create one quest, one experience. If I create one very linear experience that you're going to go through, that's 2 hours of fun, something like that. Or I could be showing you a set of systems that leads to a near infinite possibility of experiences that you can have. Again, Ashes of Creation is doing that. It is telling you we're going to create all of these systems. Narrative aside, I've said before that I don't really believe that narrative is going to be as important in Ashes of Creation. Obviously, they're doing it so that it is the full experience for all kinds of game players. Not that I wouldn't do a little narrative quest that was in Ashes of Creation, but narrative quests exists. I have so many options for doing narrative quests in other games. It's not what brings me to Ashes of Creation, but that's something more personal for me and a concern that I have about the actual just development time when you have to brute force develop these narratives. These are not AI generated. They're not sort of emergent gameplay. Somebody has to sit there, write it, create it, script it, test it, make sure it doesn't break when you do it out of, all of the stuff that comes with quest design. And it all leads to an experience that might last 15 minutes to half an hour. You do it once and that's it. Next is something that I think that Ashes of Creation is not necessarily guilty of, but has benefited from, and that is beware of graphics. So with Unreal 5, and as with any time that there is an upgrade to a visual engine, it could happen next with Unity, probably not, but let's just say it happens with Unreal 6 at some point or whatever. I remember this happened with the Crytek engine. You would see these things, this is a while back, you'd see new images coming out and you'd think, wow, that looks awesome. And you're so preoccupied with how pretty everything looks that you're not really stopping to think, is this going to be fun at all? So I think that's one of the ways that hype is generated most artificially is with cutscenes and scenic pans over beautiful scenery. Put it to you simply, this is not really like hot news from a developer. I think everyone knows this at this point, but I can go to one of the asset stores, buy a bunch of assets, use a generator, and create what appears to be a AAA title, wonderful graphics, beautiful lighting, fog, and all this stuff. In just about a week, I can have all of this put together to the point where if I were then talking over it and saying, I'm going to create this world where you can do anything. Want to fly a rocket ship? Want to fight a dragon? You can do that. And then just have like store asset rocket ship, store asset dragon. But I'm just showing them in the environment maybe. Maybe they're well lit. Maybe everything is beautiful, but I'm not showing you how any of this connects or what makes this go or that even actually being able to do it. Actually fight the dragon, actually get on the rocket and take off. So these are the things where execution matters. So be wary of graphics. Don't get too overhyped for something looking pretty. It's nice that it's going to look pretty. Obviously, I think it's a good idea that we went with Unreal 5 for Ashes of Creation at this point. But that brings me to my next point. It's all about making sure that the development timeline is not being completely surpassed by the rate of change of the industry and technology. So that means if Unreal 6 is going to come out before this Unreal 5 version of Ashes of Creation is done. Not that it is, I'm just saying if it were the case that we were thinking of this happening, and I mean, Pantheon has been in development for like a decade or something. So it could happen. It's possible that this could happen to a project. If that trajectory doesn't look like it's going to release before the next step, then now you can start worrying because the rate of change is outpacing and therefore will basically obsolete the game before it gets to come out. So you got to make sure that regardless of how passionate you are and how much you'd like to wait until the game is done to release it, that your development speed outpaces the rate of change in the industry and technology. And last but not least, I think that one of the best things to do when looking at development and also just news from a game, because most of what I'm talking about here is not technical development. I doubt really that many developers will share technical development. It's completely boring, changes a lot. Not many people would be interested. But when we're talking about development, we're talking about something that the developer wants feedback on, but is going to be something that the player is going to directly interface with, gameplay, generally speaking. So when you're looking at that gameplay, I want you to ask yourself one question. How long will the fun last? Okay? Is this going to be fun for 5 minutes or 5 hours or 5 days or 5 years? And the answer is going to be drastically different in different intervals for different types of gameplay. Some gameplay is going to be really fun for 5 minutes and then start losing its fun. Some gameplay is not going to be that much fun for 5 minutes, but it gains fun as you go to 5 hours. So look at the systems at play and ask yourself, how much fun am I going to be able to have with this? If the thing that you're looking for is a 2-hour experience that's going to be a lot of fun for like next weekend or something like that, you're gonna have some time off, you just wanna play for 2 hours and you're done. There's nothing wrong with being excited for something that's going to last 2 hours. Watching a movie, something like that, may only be fun the first time for a lot of movies. I find that to be the case more and more these days, but that's a different point. You basically are entitled to, as the consumer, be happy with 2 hours of entertainment and call it good. But the things that we're looking for typically, and when I say we, I mean me, in an MMORPG is something that's going to last more than 2 hours. It's going to be something that you're going to be playing for the next couple of years, hopefully. And so for that, you're looking for something that is a system that is going to produce variety, enduring fun and challenges in a wide scope of gameplay approaches, whether it be crafting, whether it be PvP, PvE, all of these things. So that is one place, again, that I think Ashes of Creation has excelled. They've gone, like I said, above where I think they should even be by trying to incorporate a narrative structure to go more towards a theme park MMORPG, which is a bit of dangerous territory, but they are definitely set on trying to at least deliver the full package. So that's it from me. That's what I look for when I am watching announcements and development of other games. This is not an exhaustive list, so please tell me what are some of the things that you look for that you think is very important in development. I really do think that it's essential for at least, gamers like me, which are also game developers, very much involved in the industry, to try to be involved in the industry also before the game is released, because otherwise there's just no way, especially for us indie devs, there's no way for us to get feedback on our games from more than a handful of people, like family and friends and a couple of maybe very interested gamers. We want to be able to know, are we headed in the right direction? Do you like this? What don't you like about it, etc. Try to be constructive about it. Don't just say this sucks and move on, because that doesn't help either. That just kind of demoralizes us. But I'll tell you what doesn't demoralize us is a little like and a subscribe to this channel, and I will see you next time.